She walked into class with a 4.0 GPA. By the end of the week, her lab access was gone. He muttered it under his breath, just loud enough. This isn't Africa. That one sentence, it erased her from the department, but not from history. Because in the basement, working alone, she created a compound that could replace lithium. And just when they tried to delete her data, someone tried to patent it, without her name. Cut to black screen. Text, you won't believe what she did next. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. She walked into the lecture hall with a 4.0 GPA, but all they saw was her skin. The air in Keller Hall was always a few degrees colder than the rest of the campus, physically and otherwise. The white noise of humming fluorescent lights did little to mute the low murmurs of students filing in for Dr. Barrett Sloan's Advanced Molecular Theory seminar. To most, it was just another Tuesday. But for Imani Cross, it was the beginning of her third semester in one of the most competitive PhD programs in the country. She walked in alone, head high, spiral notebook pressed against her chest like armor. Her locks were tied back into a neat bun, glasses spotless, expression unreadable. Her seat in the front row, always the front row, was already claimed with her name card taped to the desk by a TA. But as she moved through the aisle, conversation slowed. Eyes tracked her. It wasn't new. Imani was used to it now. The way white students would exchange glances when she raised her hand. How lab partners hesitated before agreeing to work with her. The subtle but constant reminder, you're not one of us. It was subtle enough to gaslight, yet loud enough to isolate. Dr. Sloan, the department chair, started the seminar as he always did. Dry, fast, dismissive. No greetings, no eye contact, just content. He was a towering man, with silver hair and precision-cut suits, more interested in grants than students. His voice carried that particular brand of authority that made you believe him even when he was wrong. Which is why lithium-ion will remain the standard for the next 2 decades, he said, erasing the board with a ragged swipe. Anyone proposing alternatives is simply ignoring the stability and established infrastructure. Imani's pen stilled. She knew this was directed at her. Not directly. But she'd submitted her thesis proposal 2 weeks ago, arguing the exact opposite. She believed a more abundant, affordable compound could outclass lithium, if synthesized correctly. It wasn't some wild opinion. It was rooted in peer-reviewed work and years of her own preliminary data. But she'd made the mistake of challenging the narrative, and Sloan wasn't known for tolerating that, especially not from people like her. She waited after class, standing off to the side as the others filed out. When she finally approached the lectern, Sloan didn't look up from his laptop. I'm following up on my thesis advisor assignment, she said, trying to sound neutral. I submitted my match form last week. You were listed as my first choice. Sloan exhaled. The kind of exhale that wasn't tired. It was annoyed. I reviewed your proposal, he said flatly, still not looking at her. You're a bit off course. Off course how? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Unrealistic. Unfocused. And frankly, he looked up finally, eyes cold behind his frameless glasses. Outside the scope of what this lab is equipped to support. Mani's throat tightened. I'm not asking for special equipment. I've already synthesized a base sample. I'm aware. He cut her off. But lab space and supervision aren't just handed out, especially not for speculative projects. It's not speculative, she said, pulse rising. I ran 6 trials. The compound showed consistent. Miss Cross, he interrupted again. This time firmer, slower. We don't do charity mentoring here. The words hung in the air like a slap. Imani blinked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no mistaking what he meant. He turned back to his laptop as if the conversation had ended. Her voice dropped sharper now. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for an academic advisor to support a research proposal backed by data. Silence. A beat too long. Then Sloan looked up again, this time with the faintest trace of a smirk. Have you considered joining Dr. Hendrick's Diversity Fellowship track? They're always looking for, let's say, unconventional applicants. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Because if she did, she'd either cry or break something. So she nodded slowly, jaw tight. Thank you for your time, Dr. Sloan. She turned to leave, but as she walked away, she heard it just barely audible, muttered under his breath, as he reached for his mug. This isn't Africa. She stopped walking. She didn't turn around, didn't breathe. The words hit harder than she expected, not because of their novelty, but because of their precision. A surgical strike to invalidate, Not just her idea, but her identity, her origin, her existence. She kept walking. Outside the lecture hall, the midday sun burned hotter than it should have. Keller Hall's brick walls seemed to radiate heat and disdain. She found an empty bench under a tree and sat down, trying not to break. What had she expected? This wasn't her first racist encounter. But this one was different. This one was institutional, calculated. This wasn't a classmate's ignorance or a sideways glance. This was the gatekeeper, the one who decided whose work was worthy and whose was a waste of lab space, making it clear, you do not belong. She thought about her mother then, about the night before she left for grad school, how her mother had packed 3 shoeboxes of books into her suitcase, whispering over and over, "Don't let them make you smaller than you are." She hadn't felt small in years. But right now she felt microscopic. Later that evening, during the lab rotation mixer, Imani stood near the back wall, arms crossed. The other PhD candidates mingled, exchanging excited talk about research direction and grant opportunities. She overheard one group talking about carbon nanostructures and a breakthrough that had just been published in Nature Chemistry. None of them looked her way. She spotted Professor Hendricks, head of the diversity fellowship Sloan had smugly mentioned. He smiled warmly and motioned for her to join a group of underrepresented students. She nodded politely but didn't move. She didn't want to be part of a side program. She didn't want handouts. She wanted her work respected on its merits. She wanted someone to look at her and see what she saw when she looked in the mirror. A brilliant mind on the brink of something revolutionary. But that wasn't how they saw her. She didn't know how to change that. Not yet. But she would. She had to. The night ended in silence. Imani returned to her dorm, stared at the ceiling for hours, and replayed Sloane's words on a loop. This isn't Africa. Not a slip, not a mistake. A message, a warning. But warnings are only effective when they land on fear. And something inside her was starting to feel less afraid and more awake. She opened her laptop, pulled up her notes, and started refining her proposal again. Not because she needed their permission, but because they needed her results, whether they admitted it or not. The screen glowed soft in the darkness, illuminating the determination etched into her face. If the system wouldn't make room for her work, she'd force it to. She didn't know it yet, but the compound she was about to finalize wouldn't just silence her doubters. It would shift the global energy landscape. What she didn't see, what she couldn't have known, was that Sloan had already forwarded her proposal to a corporate contact, claiming it as departmental property in early-stage review. One sentence turned her dream lab into a battlefield. Imani didn't sleep. After Sloane's muttered words, "This isn't Africa," replayed in her mind like a cursed chorus, she lay in bed with her laptop open, the cursor blinking on her untouched proposal draft. For a while she tried to convince herself she'd misheard. Maybe he said this isn't abstract, but the cadence, the tone, the quiet venom behind it, she knew exactly what he'd said. And worse, exactly what he meant. By morning she had made a decision. She wasn't going to let it slide. The university had a formal process for complaints. It was time to see if that process was anything more than decoration. She walked across campus with purpose, stepping into Dr. Eli Brennan's office, the department chair, and one of the few people who technically outranked Sloan. Dr. Brennan, a man in his 60s with a disarming smile and faded corduroy blazers, motioned to the seat across from him. "Imani, what can I do for you?" She sat down, spine straight. "I need to report a discriminatory comment made by Professor Sloan. It happened yesterday after seminar." Brennan's smile faltered, just slightly. "Go on." She recounted the conversation word for word. She described how Sloan rejected her proposal, the charity mentoring jab, and finally, the whispered remark, the one that now lived in her bloodstream. For a long moment, Brennan said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers across his chest, and said the 5 words that hollowed her out. "Try not to take it personally." Imani blinked. "Excuse me? These things can be complicated," Brennan said carefully. "Barrett's style is abrasive. Everyone knows that. He speaks without filters. But you're here for the science. Don't let personal distractions derail your focus." She stared at him. "So what do I do when the head of the department questions my humanity?" "You're overreacting, Imani," he said, more firmly now. "Focus on your work. That's the best way to prove yourself." There it was. The same script they always handed people like her. Be excellent. Be unbothered. Be silent. She left the office without another word. But something inside her began to curdle. In the weeks that followed, the fallout unfolded slowly, quietly, but deliberately.
The lab's energy shifted.
At first it was subtle. Conversations paused when she entered. Resumes weren't passed to her during mock grant reviews. Group emails accidentally left her off the thread. Then it became overt. A classmate in her chromatography module laughed during a group discussion and said, "Well, Imani probably thinks it's racist if we correct her." She pretended not to hear it. But she did. And so did everyone else. The shift, she discovered, wasn't organic. It was orchestrated. Someone had leaked to Sloane's circle that she'd filed a race-based complaint. Word traveled fast through tight academic corridors. The implication was clear. Imani wasn't just a student anymore. She was a liability, a troublemaker. "She's playing the race card," one TA whispered in the break room. Unaware, Imani stood just outside the door. Sloane didn't say anything that bad. That whisper carried more power than they knew. It transformed her from a scholar to a stereotype. The angry black woman, the hypersensitive minority, the one who always made everything about race. Each day the lab felt less like a research space and more like a battlefield. Imani found herself craving stillness, clarity. Sometimes, she'd sit outside the old maintenance building, after dark, watching the steam rise from the vents. That's where she met Mr. Rubin. He was in his late 50s, wore pressed navy coveralls with his name stitched on the front, and moved like someone who knew he was invisible. He pushed his mop like a man painting a mural, slow, patient, deliberate. "You're here late," he said one night, pausing near the bench where she sat. "Better than being in that lab," she replied, not looking up. He squinted at her. "You're the chemistry one. I seen you on that whiteboard over in East Keller. Always writing in green marker." She raised an eyebrow. "You watch the boards?" He chuckled. "I watch everything. Part of the job." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, softly, "I think I chose the wrong school." Rubin nodded slowly. "They tell you you don't belong?" She looked up at him. "Don't need to hear him say it," he added. "You can smell it in the air." Imani exhaled through her nose. A small, humorless laugh. "I filed a report," she said. "Tried to follow protocol, but all they told me was to ignore it." He leaned against his mop like it was a cane. "That's the trick they play. Make you think dignity is optional." She glanced down at her hands, still stained faintly with silver nitrate from her last experiment. "I keep wondering if I should just transfer. Start over somewhere better." Rubin shook his head slowly. "You don't run from what you're meant to beat. Especially not when the problem's bigger than you." There was something in his tone, weight, conviction, that landed like a stone in her chest. "You stay," he said. "You finish what you came to do, and you make sure that when you leave, they feel the gap." Imani didn't respond, but her fingers curled tighter around her notebook. That night, something changed. She stopped waiting for Sloane's validation, stopped trying to fit a mold built to exclude her. Instead, she pulled out her mother's old chemistry texts, annotated in red ink, and Swahili notes, and set up a makeshift workspace in the corner of the undergrad chemical storage room. It wasn't much: a hot plate, beakers, borrowed pipettes, and equipment she quietly checked out during the day. She used her living stipend to order reagents online. The packages arrived labeled under a pseudonym. Imani Cross had officially gone underground. By day, she sat through lectures and smiled politely at students who wouldn't meet her eyes. By night, she returned to her makeshift lab and worked alone, focused, relentless. Her formula was built on a risky hypothesis: a non-metal compound that could hold charge longer than lithium, but remain stable at high temperatures. No one had tried it, not seriously, because it didn't come from the West's usual channels. Her foundation came from African mineral research, indigenous farming storage techniques, and an obscure Kenyan thesis her mother had translated by hand. It sounded like fiction to Sloane, but she was about to prove it was science. The first batch failed. Too acidic. The second batch cracked the casing. The third batch sat dormant. But the fourth did something strange. She adjusted the microscope lens, fingers trembling slightly, and stared into the slide. The compound shimmered faintly, more than expected. She touched the glass with a stylus, initiating an electrical pulse. The particles moved. Not just moved, reorganized. She blinked, leaned back, and recalibrated. Then she ran the test again. Same result. Energy retention 2.3x above baseline. She ran it a third time, and this time as she introduced a secondary catalyst. The compound not only held, it repelled decay. That shouldn't be possible. But it was. Her heart pounded. She leaned forward, staring at the microscopic structure dancing beneath the glass. It looked like a map, like a living city of atoms, adapting in real time. She reached for her notebook, scribbling numbers furiously. Then the power flickered. Once, twice, and then the microscope screen went black. She cursed, rushing to the circuit box in the wall. The backup generator should have kicked in. It always did. But nothing. She flipped the breaker. Lights returned. The screen stayed blank. She turned back to the microscope. The compound was gone. Not broken, not spilled, gone. The slide was intact, the casing untouched. But the sample she'd spent weeks perfecting had disappeared. Not dissolved, not burned, erased. Imani stared at it, stunned. And then slowly, she noticed something else. The chemical storage log, handwritten and always tucked into the back cabinet, was missing. She opened the side drawer where she kept her backup flash drive, also gone. That room had no windows. And the only person who knew she worked here, outside of the cameraless walls, was her. In the silence, a single printed page fluttered from the ceiling vent, a copy of her proposal, with a red stamped note scrawled across it. Already reviewed, not original. Her late-night breakthrough could rewrite chemical history, if it doesn't get buried first. The room still smelled like burnt polymer when Imani stepped back from the microscope. The missing sample burned into her memory like a phantom limb. The printed page with the red stamped words, already reviewed, not original, now sat folded in her coat pocket, heavy as a verdict. Someone had been there. Someone with access. Someone who wanted her to stop. But Imani didn't stop. She rebuilt, piece by piece, using her backups, what little she had left. She began reconstructing the compound from scratch, guided only by scribbled notes, fragmented trial logs, and her memory. Her body ran on caffeine in spite, fueled by something colder than ambition, defiance. If they wanted her to disappear, they were going to have to erase chemistry itself. It took 2 weeks, 2 full weeks of living in the shadows of Keller Hall, sleeping in empty study rooms, and sneaking past janitorial shifts. She worked like someone possessed, because she was. By a truth no one wanted to admit. Genius didn't wear just one face. When the 5th rebuild finally stabilized, same shimmer, same charge retention, she cried quietly into her latex gloves. This time she didn't just test it. She documented everything. She used 3 separate cameras, filmed the entire synthesis process, logged the particle decay, measured every variable, and labeled each reagent bottle with GPS-coded stickers she could track via her phone. She wasn't just building a formula anymore. She was building evidence, because she knew what was coming. She ran the test 10 times, then 20, then 35. Same results. The compound, dubbed Aminex32, in her private notes, retained charge 2.3 times longer than lithium-based alternatives, remained stable in extreme heat, and showed none of the toxicity usually associated with high-capacity alternatives. What's more, the core material was biodegradable, cheap, abundant, sourced from minerals primarily found in sub-Saharan Africa and South America. It was, for all intents and purposes, a revolution, and it was buried in the basement of a university that didn't even believe she belonged. She needed help. Not from Sloan. Never again. She thought long and hard before approaching anyone, but eventually she narrowed it down to one person, Dr. Zuri Kimani, a quiet assistant professor known for her molecular modeling work, and more importantly, known for minding her own business. Dr. Kimani had once offered Imani a ride to the airport during winter break. She'd never asked why Imani always left campus so late at night. She just drove, played jazz, and asked about her thesis like it actually mattered. Now Imani waited in Dr. Kimani's office, her bag bulging with sealed samples and a flash drive clutched in her hand like a weapon. Zuri entered a few minutes late, breathless from teaching. "Imani, everything okay? I need you to see something," Imani said, pulling out the drive. "Right now, and I need your word this doesn't leave this room." Zuri paused, hearing the urgency in her voice. Then she nodded. "Show me." Imani plugged in the drive and opened the video file. The screen lit up with crisp time-stamped footage of Aminex32 forming in real time. Then the graphs. Then the comparative data sets. Then the charge cycles. Zuri sat in stunned silence for almost 10 minutes. When the final slide flicked across the screen, she spoke quietly. This isn't a student project. I know. This is industrial level, government level. Umani exhaled. It's real. And I don't trust anyone else. Zuri turned slowly. How the hell did you do this without faculty support? Late nights. Anger. A janitor who believes in justice. Zuri leaned back, her voice a whisper. If these results hold up, you're about to upend the entire field. Umani nodded. Which is why I need to get it outside these walls, before someone buries it again. Zuri didn't ask what she meant by again. She could read it in her eyes. She pulled out her phone and searched something. There's a National Chemistry Innovation Grant. Deadline's tight, but you'd qualify. If you submit your proposal with this data, they'll have to review it. It's public, transparent. I need a faculty recommendation. You've got one, Zuri said without hesitation. Imani didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't fear this time. It was hope, sharp, terrifying hope. By morning, her application was in. The full proposal, the data, the samples, the synthesis footage, uploaded and timestamped to the National Chemistry Consortium's secure portal. She didn't feel relief. She felt exposed. Like someone stepping out during a lightning storm holding a metal rod. The next day, whispers began circulating in the department. Someone had seen her name on the NCC submission list. Someone had screenshot. She wasn't sure who leaked it, but it didn't take long for Sloan to appear at her lab station uninvited. Amani, he said, tone clipped, voice falsely polite. Can we talk privately? She didn't respond, just stared at him until he cleared his throat and walked to an empty corner of the lab. She followed, but not far. He leaned in, lowering his voice. I'm hearing rumors that you've submitted a grant proposal using university resources without departmental approval. Umani folded her arms. Last I checked, independent submissions are allowed. Not when they misrepresent departmental support, he snapped. You listed Zuri Kimani as an advisor. She reviewed my data. Because no one else will. He smirked. That's not how this works. You don't just invent legitimacy. Real science is peer validated, cross-reviewed. This isn't a TikTok startup, Ms. Cross. Her eyes narrowed. Neither is theft. But you seem comfortable with that. Sloane's expression hardened. I suggest you withdraw before this gets embarrassing, he said. You may be riding high now. But trust me, peer review is not kind to vanity projects. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She let the silence hum until he walked away. Then she turned back to her bench and smiled. 3 days later, Imani received a reply from the National Chemistry Consortium. Subject proposal N927-1, Amenex 32, selected for Phase 2 evaluation. Her heart raced. Phase 2 meant funding. Public review. Lab replication trials. It meant visibility. It meant Sloan couldn't control the narrative anymore. She rushed to tell Dr. Kamani. They met behind the biology annex, away from cameras and ears. You're in, Zuri said, reading the email. This is big. Really big. I don't think you realize yet. Imani laughed. Genuinely. For the first time in months. I don't think I want to realize. Not until it's in print. Zuri grinned. We're getting close. That night, Imani returned to her official student workstation. The one she hadn't touched in weeks. To upload her finalized data logs for archival. She opened the lab computer. Typed in her login. Access denied. She tried again. Still denied. Confused, she walked over to the department's main archive computer and logged in using her grant credentials. The folder titled Cross Battery Innovation 2025 was gone. She searched manually. Nothing. She searched hidden files. Nothing. She checked the server's recent deletion log, but it had been wiped clean. She opened her personal flash drive. Files corrupted. The backup? Scrambled. Her fingers trembled. She ran a diagnostics check. Then another. Then a third. Everything. All her documentation, test footage, synthesis protocols, had been purged from every university-connected device. She backed away from the computer. Heart thudding. This wasn't a glitch. This was surgical. She turned toward the lab door and saw the cleaning crew had already come through. Everything was spotless. Even the tiny fingerprint smudge she'd left on the microscope lens was gone. She felt cold. Then she checked the NCC portal, the one place she knew her work still existed. Error. Submission 9.27.1. Document package not found. She froze, refreshed. Same error. Imani Cross stood in the center of the lab, a void opening beneath her feet. And then on the table behind her, she saw something she hadn't noticed. A printed copy of her Phase 2 acceptance letter. Slashed in red marker, scrawled in handwriting she instantly recognized. University property, unauthorized dissemination reported. Just as panic begins to set in, her phone vibrates. An unknown number texting. I know what they did. Meet me. Bring nothing. Come alone. They tried to delete her work, but underestimated her memory. The text buzzed on Imani's phone long after the lab lights dimmed and her hope dimmed with them. I know what they did. Meet me. Bring nothing. Come alone. No name. No number. Just a warning. Or a promise. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her hands were still shaking from watching her entire research archive vanish in front of her. Years of calculations, trials, footage, gone in less than 30 seconds, digitally vaporized, like it had never existed. She locked the lab door behind her and walked. No destination, no map, just footsteps through the cracked concrete of a campus that had never really held her. By the time she reached the East Quad, the sky was bruised with early morning light. Somewhere a sprinkler coughed to life. And she knew, if she stopped walking, she would collapse. So she sat on a bench that faced the chemistry building. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. Because it had. Imani didn't go back to the dorm. She went to the basement of the student union, where the university forgot things, broken vending machines, discarded trophies, and an abandoned copy machine room that still had an Ethernet cable wired through the ceiling tiles. She pulled out her laptop. Not the university-issued one. Her personal one. The old Dell, with the missing E key, and the boot-up glitch. The one she hadn't connected to any campus networks in months. She plugged in a drive from her sock. A black, nondescript password-encrypted flash drive, not registered to any name. And there it was. Her work. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to rebuild. She whispered a thank you to her mother, who drilled data paranoia into her from the age of 11. Never trust a single vault, her mother always said. Trust your hands, trust your memory. By 3 p.m., Imani was knocking on Dr. Kamani's door. Zuri opened it, surprised. I thought they suspended your access. They did, Imani said. But I'm not here for their lab. I need yours. Zuri looked over her shoulder, then stepped aside. Come in. For the next 5 hours they recreated everything. From memory, from backup, from muscle. Zuri handled the controls while Imani dictated. She mapped out compound ways from scratch, retraced reagent ratios, even sketched the particle graphs on a legal pad before coding them into the computer. Zuri watched her work like someone watching a myth come to life. You remember every measurement, she said, half in awe. I remember because I had to, Imani answered. Nobody else ever would. They moved quietly, carefully. They didn't use campus servers. They kept everything local, backed up on mirrored drives hidden in Zuri's office plant pot and Imani's shampoo bottle. By midnight, they had it. A Manix 32. Version. Stronger. Smarter. Cleaner. Imani stared at the vial, her reflection warped in the glass. I'm submitting a formal complaint. Zuri's smile faded. That path doesn't end in justice. It ends in buried paperwork. Then I'll dig it up again, Imani said. Every time. She filed the complaint at 8:37 the next morning. Accusation. Unauthorized deletion of student intellectual property. Subject, Professor Barrett Sloan. The dean's office assigned it to the Academic Integrity Committee. She received a cold email acknowledging her submission, informing her that a preliminary review panel would be formed. 3 days later, the panel was announced. 4 professors, 3 of them Sloane's personal friends. The 4th was an adjunct who had once lost a funding bid to Imani during her undergrad years. Imani sat in the back of the hearing room when they reviewed the claim. The panel chair, Dr. Martin Elwood, opened the meeting with a warning. We will not entertain inflammatory language or unverified conspiracy. Imani stood, hands clasped in front of her. My data was deleted. Access was revoked. Only one profile had admin-level credentials during the deletion window, and you're suggesting that Professor Sloan purposefully compromised your research? Elwood asked, as though she were accusing a saint. I'm saying the logs show his credentials were used, she said. I'm saying I submitted evidence, and now it's gone. Sloan sat silently 2 rows ahead, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded with boredom. When it was his turn, he didn't deny the deletion. He denied the premise. I believe Miss Cross was operating outside her assigned project parameters, he said, with that faint performative frown, which would constitute a breach of lab protocol. Her files were flagged by our internal system. Whether they were erased automatically or by admin oversight is unclear. But you had the only admin login. I also have a departmental assistant, he said, with a casual shrug. It's possible there was miscommunication. But frankly, if Miss Cross had stayed within her authorized bounds, this wouldn't be a concern. Elwood nodded, pleased. Imani burned. The panel didn't rule that day. They said they'd deliberate, which was code for delay until it stops being a headline. The next week was hell. Emails went unanswered. Calls dodged. Her project funding was paused pending internal review. Worse, the academic rumor mill exploded. One student posted on a private forum that Imani had faked her data for attention. Another said she was trying to cancel Sloan for a promotion. Someone else floated that she'd used diversity politics to get into the program in the first place. Her inbox filled with anonymous emails. Keep playing the race card. You'll get a job at BuzzFeed. Maybe try actual science next time, sweetheart. Affirmative action gone wild. Imani sat in Zuri's office, phone in hand, screen glowing with the hate. I should have shut up, she said quietly. Zuri looked at her sharply. Don't you dare.
They're winning.
No, Zuri said, sitting beside her. They're reacting. Because you're shaking the ground under them. Imani looked at her. Then why does it feel like I'm falling through it? Zuri paused, then reached into her drawer. She pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the desk. Imani opened it. Inside was a folded note, handwritten. It said, they only erase what they fear. That night, something shifted again. Imani sat alone in the chemical modeling lab. The lights dimmed. The hum of machines in the background. She pulled up the backup footage of Amonix 32's synthesis. She watched it from start to finish. Then again. Then a third time. Each time she noticed a tiny anomaly in the footage. At exactly 3:48 into the reaction, the compound shimmered, not in a steady state, but in pulse. She ran it frame by frame. There was a pattern. She zoomed in, adjusted contrast, enhanced particle resolution. The compound wasn't just forming stable bonds. It was self-stabilizing. That shouldn't have been possible. Not without some kind of AI-suggested catalyst or biological driver. But there it was, encoded in the structure. A memory. Imani whispered under her breath. You remembered how to fix yourself. It wasn't just energy storage. It was intelligent energy storage. She hadn't invented a better battery. She'd invented a learning material. Her hand trembled as she hit record, narrating the discovery in real time. This was bigger than she thought, and they'd tried to delete it. Because they knew. Because he knew. The next morning, she opened her inbox expecting more threats. Instead, there was a new email. No subject line. Just an attached .mp4 file. She clicked it. The video opened to a dimly lit office. The camera shook slightly, like it was hidden. At the desk sat Professor Sloan, talking to someone off camera. His voice was low, sharp. She thinks she's some kind of messiah, just because she whipped up a test tube cocktail. Typical African imagination, romanticizing scrap minerals and folklore science. Off camera, someone laughed nervously. She's dangerous, Sloan continued. Not because she's right, but because the world wants her to be. Imani leaned forward, frozen. The video cut off after 37 seconds. Attached to the message was one line. They need to hear this. Upload it. I've got your back. As she prepares to upload the clip, another email pops up. This time from the university legal team. You are hereby instructed to cease all communication related to Professor Sloan pending internal legal review. One hidden mic revealed what they really thought of her. Ame didn't sleep that night either. Not from fear this time, but from something sharper: choice. On one side was the email from University Legal Counsel, warning her to cease all communication related to Professor Sloan, pending internal review. A quiet threat, cloaked in policy, urging her to stay in her lane. On the other side sat the file on her screen, the recording of Sloan mocking her intelligence, culture, and very right to exist in academic spaces. Her cursor hovered over the upload button. She imagined the fallout. The eyes, the headlines, the online trolls. But then she thought of her mother, of Ruben, of the tiny pulse she'd seen in Amonix 32, a compound that had learned to protect itself. She clicked upload, and the world caught fire. By morning, the video had hit 8. By noon, by sundown, it was the 1-1 trending clip on Black academic Twitter. People didn't just share it, they dissected it, paused it, analyzed the smirk in Sloane's voice, the cowardly laughter off camera, the language, the legacy, the unspoken network of power and silence. Tweets flooded in like a storm surge. This is why we leave academia. She didn't imagine it. She endured it. Umani Cross deserves a Nobel and Sloane deserves unemployment. Let me guess. Diversity hire. Right? Except she built a better battery than y'all ever dreamed of. Students began staging silent sit-ins outside the chemistry building, holding up signs that read, "This is Africa. We belong here." Black brilliance isn't a threat. It's a fact. Within 24 hours, the university's PR team issued a neutral-toned statement. We are aware of the recent circulation of a video involving faculty. An internal review is underway. But it was too late. The video had already crossed state lines. By day 2, national science blogs had picked it up. The Catalyst, a tech media outlet with 3.4 million subscribers, ran a headline that screamed, "Racism in the lab, leaked audio reveals what keeps black scientists from rising." They reached out to Imani directly, not just for comment, for a full feature. Imani sat across from Dr. Kimani in a dimly lit faculty lounge when the email pinged her inbox. Zuri leaned over her shoulder. "Are you going to do it?" Umani hesitated. "It's tempting, but the school already flagged me once. They'll say I'm jeopardizing the review process." Zuri shook her head. "You're not jeopardizing anything. They are. You're just dragging it into the light." Imani didn't reply, but the words echoed as she stared at the email. She typed one sentence. "Let's talk." But even as her story spread, the department retaliated, quietly, bureaucratically. On the morning of her scheduled NCC Phase 2 submission, she received a notice from the university's Research Compliance Office. "Your grant application has been suspended due to pending investigations into data handling, ethics, and laboratory policy violations." She stared at the screen. For a long time, she didn't feel anything. Then, slowly, the betrayal registered. They weren't just trying to erase her now. They were trying to discredit her. To turn her into the stereotype they always whispered about behind closed doors. The loud one. The angry one. The dishonest one. She called the NCC board. Left voicemails. Sent clarifying documents. Nothing. For 48 hours her status remained, under institutional review, frozen. Zuri slammed her mug on the table when she heard. "This is criminal." "They're smart," Imani said bitterly. "They didn't touch the science. Just the paperwork. Just enough to stain it. And Sloane? Still on leave. With pay." Zuri leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time for a different strategy." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Lawsuit? Like legacy?" Zuri replied. "Let's not ask for space anymore. Let's build our own." That night, a new email hit Imani's inbox. No subject line again. No formal greeting. Just one sentence. "We've been watching. Let's talk about your future. And your formula." Attached was a LinkedIn profile. Dr. Ayanna Brooks, former MIT professor, current biotech CEO, Forbes 40 under 40, alumna of Imani's University, graduated. Her pinned post read, "I built my career with one hand and fought back with the other. No black woman should ever have to choose between excellence and dignity. Imani Cross, we see you." Imani's hands trembled as she clicked reply. They met via video the next morning. Ayanna appeared in a sun-drenched office, calm and sharp as polished steel. "I don't want to quote," she said after Imani thanked her. "I want to give you freedom." Imani blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I have a lab in Atlanta, a full development team, and independent funding. No university board, no tenure committees. Just clean science. Yours." Imani's breath caught. "You want to hire me? I want to back you," Ayanna said. "Ownership stays yours. We help you finish it. Protect it. Scale it. You've already changed the game. They're just trying to delay the clock." Imani stared at the screen. "Why me?" Ayanna smiled. "Because when I was 27 I had a theory, and a man like Sloane told me to go back to where I came from. I didn't have someone to help me then. But you do now." For a moment Imani didn't respond. Then she nodded, tears threatening to fall. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's finish it." Word of Ayanna's offer spread fast. The same students who had once avoided Imani in lab hallways now reached out privately, some apologizing, some offering to help. The chair of the physics department requested a meeting. So did an adjunct from the engineering school. But it wasn't gratitude that drove their sudden interest. It was proximity to power. Because now, Imani wasn't just a student. She was a story. And stories with heat attract followers. Or fire. Dr. Brennan, the department chair who once told her to ignore distractions, requested a restorative dialogue session. She declined. The university published a revised statement. We support all students, and we are committed to investigating historical and structural inequities in our programs. It read like it had been written by an AI trained on HR policies. Meanwhile, the sit-ins continued. Sloane's office door was found covered in sticky notes, handwritten quotes from the leaked audio, rewritten as affirmations. African imagination built pyramids and compounds. This is our lab now, not romanticism, resilience. Imani passed by that hallway one afternoon. She didn't stop, but she smiled. 2 days later, a box arrived for her. No return label, just her name in Sharpie. Inside, a framed print of an old journal article. Yellowed, watermarked. It was the first U.S. publication to cite African mineral research as a foundation for high-voltage experimentation. Taped to the frame was a note. Keep writing the chapters they tried to skip. No signature, just a gold foil sticker of the NCC emblem. The same emblem that had once labeled her submission as under review. As Imani prepares for her first official lab day at Ayana's facility, she receives a text from an unknown number. You'll never launch. Check who's funding her. Attached is a PDF file titled, Dr. Ayana Brooks, Investor Portfolio, Confidential. She lost her lab, but gained a platform bigger than the university. The PDF stared back at her from the screen. Dr. Ayana Brooks, Investor Portfolio, Confidential. The text message was short, sharp. You'll never launch. Check who's funding her. Imani hesitated, finger hovering over the download icon. She didn't want to question Ayana. Not now. Not after everything. But she also knew how the game worked. How betrayal didn't always come from the obvious villains. Still, she clicked. The document loaded in seconds. Dozens of names. Venture capital firms. Energy conglomerates. A few private names she didn't recognize. One line, halfway down the first page, made her stomach twist. Strategic Capital Partner, Axiom Core Energy Holdings. She knew that name. Axiom Core was one of the largest lithium extractors in the U.S. The same corporation Sloane had bragged about consulting for in his faculty bio. Coincidence? Or something more?
Imani didn't know.
But for now, she decided she wouldn't let suspicion outpace the truth. She closed the file and boarded the train to Atlanta. Ayana's facility sat just outside the city, an architectural hybrid of glass and concrete, nestled against a pine-draped ridge, sleek, quiet, defiant in its design. When Imani stepped inside, the first thing she noticed wasn't the tech. It was the faces. Brown, black, Asian, indigenous, women, queer, disabled. Every corridor she passed pulsed with minds that the traditional institutions had sidelined, boxed, or quietly buried. Here they weren't tokens. They were architects. Ayana met her at the front entrance, dressed in black slacks and a cobalt blouse, her afro shaped like a crown. I meant what I said, she told Imani. You lead the work. I back it. But if something here doesn't feel right, you speak. We build the future out loud. Imani nodded. I can do that. No, Ayana said, smiling. You already did. The first week felt like someone handing Imani a new set of lungs. Her lab wasn't a converted undergrad closet anymore. It was a fully optimized space, equipped with a modular airflow chamber, programmable synthesis reactors, and a quantum modeling suite that made her old campus software look like a calculator. Even better, her team didn't treat her like a guest. They treated her like a peer. On her second day, a technician named Camille noticed an anomaly in one of the binding sequences. Looks like there's a micro glitch in the amino stack, Camille said, scrolling. But you probably already clocked that. Imani smiled. I did, but the fact that you did first, that's the point. The days blurred into discovery. They ran 41 trial variants of Aminix 32 in 8 days. The 42nd trial broke everything. In the best way. It wasn't just the compound's energy density that shocked them. It was its feedback loop. Using newly installed high-frequency scanners, they discovered that once charged, the compound developed a stable rhythm that allowed it to adapt in real time to temperature fluctuations, storage capacity, and even load strain. It meant a battery made with amine X32 could dynamically scale its performance based on the environment, heat, humidity, overload. The compound could adjust. Imani had stumbled into a new class of material science, what Iana called responsive storage. The term caught fire inside the lab. Within a week, the team filed a provisional patent under Imani's name, with Iana listed as secondary technical partner. This time, everything was documented, every result mirrored, every email encrypted. No one was going to erase her again. Then came the call from Geneva. Iana's assistant burst into the lab mid-morning, eyes wide. "They want it," she said breathlessly. "The Global Sustainable Energy Conference." They read the white paper. "They're inviting you and Iana to present in the keynote series." Imani blinked. "They want me?" Iana stepped in, holding a printed letter. "Correction. They want your compound. But they'll get you too." Imani held the page in her hands, the words blurry with disbelief. This wasn't a blog post or a classroom debate. This was Geneva.
This was world stage.
But just as she began to breathe, the past slammed the door open again. It started with an alert from her patent attorney, then a second email, then a third. Each message said the same thing in colder and colder legalese. A patent claim has been filed by Barrett Sloan of North Carolina State University, asserting that all research related to Amenix 32 was developed within university-funded labs during his tenure. Imani stared at the screen, her pulse climbing like a siren. Iana walked in moments later, already holding her phone. "I just saw it. He filed a claim?" Iana nodded. "Which means he's trying to block our patent until the ownership's settled." Imani's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's trying to steal it. He's trying to stall you," Iana corrected. "He knows the moment this goes public, it's yours. So he's buying time." Imani sat down. "He has the university's name, their lawyers, their records." Iana nodded. "But we have the science, the footage, the timestamps, the team, and you." Imani looked at her. "But will it matter?" Iana didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "Only if you don't give up now." That night, Imani sat in her apartment, surrounded by silence. She opened a folder on her laptop, one she hadn't touched in weeks. Inside, her original recordings. The lab footage, her first voice memo from the night she saw the compound shimmer for the first time. She hit play. Her own voice echoed from the speakers. Trial 7B. "Catalyst seems to be forming a protective shell. I think it's learning how to hold itself. That's new. That's us." She closed her eyes. Then she sent an email to her attorney. Subject line: "Let's fight." The next morning, a cease and desist arrived from Sloan's law firm. Standard, vague, threatening. Iana's team countered in hours with proof. Timestamped files, encrypted logs, signed affidavits from Zuri and Camille. Even a shadow chain of internal Slack messages where Sloan's TA joked about deleting another diversity fantasy project. It wasn't just rebuttal. It was evidence of sabotage. Iana scheduled a virtual press conference for the following week, just in case the legal channels tried to bury them quietly. "We go public if they push," she told Imani. "But the goal isn't scandal. It's science."
Imani nodded.
But she knew, deep down, it was both. Because for people like her, they never let the science speak until the scandal screamed. As the days ticked down toward Geneva, the conference issued a neutral statement. "Pending resolution of a contested patent claim, Dr. Cross's presentation has been moved to a backup keynote slot." Moved. Not cancelled, but still moved. Imani paced the lab, rage simmering beneath her skin. Camille tried to console her. "They're just hedging. Once your name clears." "I shouldn't have to clear anything," Imani said, cutting her off. "He's lying. He's taking what isn't his." "I know," Camille said gently. "But don't let him take your piece too." Imani paused, took a breath, and walked back to the synthesis station. She pulled up trial 4, then 4, then 4. The results were getting sharper, cleaner. They weren't just proving her right. They were proving him obsolete. Then, at 3:22 p.m., her phone buzzed. A new email from the U.S. Patent Office. Subject line: "Notice of interference. File number gens. Content: The following patents are currently in dispute. You have been formally requested to provide deposition materials, proof of authorship, and lab access documentation within 10 business days. Attached was Sloane's submission. At the bottom of his claim, one line burned like a branding iron. All research was conducted using university equipment, faculty supervision, and under the intellectual oversight of Professor B. Sloane. It was a lie. But lies in ink looked like truth until someone fought back. Imani stared at the screen. Her jaw set. She opened a blank document. She began to write her deposition, line by line, timestamp by timestamp, memory by memory. Just as she finishes her final paragraph, she receives a notification. Imani Cross, your credentials have been flagged for restricted access at the Geneva conference. Below it, a second alert. Access level downgraded. Guest, no stage privileges. Her oppressor just tried to steal her success, and the system helped him. The moment Imani saw the Geneva downgrade notice, access level guest, no stage privileges, her throat closed. She reread it twice, then checked the timestamp. The edit had been processed 3 minutes after the U.S. Patent Office notified her of the interference claim. She wasn't being ignored. She was being silenced. She forwarded the message to Ayana. 3 minutes later, Ayana called. No greeting. We need to talk. Now. They met in the glass-walled strategy room at the top floor of Ayana's facility. The sun was dipping low, casting long slats of light across the table. Imani sat at the edge of her seat. Ayana paid. Sloane's patent submission was flagged. We knew that, Ayana said, clicking through documents on the wall-mounted screen. But I didn't think the conference committee would respond this fast. Imani stared at the floor. They're protecting themselves. The last thing they want is a patent lawsuit mid-keynote. He didn't invent anything. Ayana snapped. He doesn't have the raw files, the synthesis videos, the AI-guided simulations. He barely knows what a responsive charge system is. Mima's voice was barely above a whisper. But he has the institution. Ayana paused, then looked directly at her. Not for long. 2 days later, the U.S. Patent Office officially froze both claims. Case status: undetermined. Review committee assigned. The email offered no emotion, no context, just bureaucracy. Imani knew what that meant. Her work was now disputed property. Until resolved, no conference could feature it, no partner could produce it, and no investor could touch it without risk. And Sloane knew that. He didn't need to prove he built the formula. He just needed to make it unusable. The backlash online began the next day. It started with a Reddit thread. Is Imani Cross the Elizabeth Holmes of climate tech? Then came a YouTube think piece from a self-proclaimed science influencer. Woke academia is breaking real innovation. A deep dive into Imani Cross's fake science claims. The clip featured blurry photos of her, stitched with out-of-context voice clips, twisted into something unrecognizable. Comments flooded in by the hour. Entitled much? She should be thanking the department for letting her in at all. Sounds like a diversity hire who couldn't deliver. She's just mad a white man knew more than her. Imani stopped reading them. But even in silence, their echo lingered. She began to retreat, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Her lab hours dropped. Her communications slowed. Zuri called and left voicemails, each one more concerned than the last. Camille offered to bring coffee and just sit, but Imani declined. Even Ayana, sharp as ever, started asking softer questions. You sleeping at all? You need to unplug for a few days? You want me to do the interview instead? Imani said no to everything. But inside, a dangerous thought had started to take root. Maybe this fight wasn't winnable. Maybe the system wasn't broken. Maybe it was working exactly as designed. That night, Ayana knocked on her door without warning. Imani opened it, still in the same hoodie from yesterday. Ayana stepped inside and dropped a thick manila folder on her coffee table. Her name's Keisha Marin, she said. She doesn't lose. Imani picked up the folder. Inside was the resume of Keisha Marin, Esquire bulldog of a New York-based intellectual property attorney, with a reputation for dismantling corporate IP theft cases, especially those involving marginalized inventors. Imani blinked. She's available? Ayana nodded. I already paid her retainer. You're her client, as of this morning. Imani swallowed. You didn't have to. I did, Ayana interrupted. Because you are not going to let a man who erased you try to own you now. There was no space left for doubt. Only fire. Keisha arrived the next day in a tan blazer and black boots that clicked like a metronome. She didn't sit when they met, just dropped a legal pad on the table and said, "Tell me everything. Start with the first compound trial." Imani walked her through it. The nights in the basement, the missing lab files, the deleted backup logs, the admin credentials, the proposal stolen before it was published. Keisha didn't take notes until the end. Then she said, "He didn't just steal your work. He created a pattern of suppression. We prove that. We kill his claim." Imani exhaled. "What do you need?" "Names," Keisha said. "Students he mentored. Projects he accessed. Anything that looks like déjà vu." Within 4 days they had 8 names. 2 current PhD students, 3 former undergrads, a postdoc now working in the private sector, a fellowship dropout, and 1 anonymous submission to a whistleblower tip line. Ayana's team set up quietly through their legal wing. Every story was a variation of Imani's. A student proposes a project. Sloan dismisses it as naive, misdirected, or outside the scope. Months later, a grant is filed, sometimes by Sloan directly, other times through a research assistant, with ideas that mirrored those submissions almost identically. Some had documentation. Others had memories. One had an email that read, "Let's be realistic about which voices get heard in scientific innovation." It was sent from Sloan's university account. When Keisha compiled the report, she titled it, "A Pattern of Intellectual Misappropriation: The Case of Barrett Sloan." It was 87 pages long. She filed it with the U.S. Patent Office the next morning, under a formal motion to suppress Sloan's claim, based on demonstrated historical precedent of exploitative authorship practices. It was a legal uppercut. And this time, it landed. 3 days later, the Patent Office responded. Motion to investigate prior incidents approved. For the first time, the case status changed from undetermined to investigative review, priority flagged. Imani stared at the email, silent. Iana leaned in. "They just admitted it's bigger than one formula." Word spread. Whispers turned into discussion. The same Reddit thread that once mocked her updated their headline. "Sloan accused of IP theft pattern emerging." Science Twitter reversed its tune. Influencers backtracked. Publications retracted. Editors issued apologies. Then, quietly, the Department of Chemistry at her old university posted a 2-line announcement. "Professor Barrett Sloan has taken an indefinite leave of absence pending external review. The department is cooperating fully with investigators." He hadn't resigned. Not yet. But he was gone for now. And this time, not by choice. The following morning, Keisha called. "They're reviewing the claim chain from the top down," she said. "If they rule in your favor, they won't just kill his patent. They'll blacklist him from future submissions." Imani stood by the window, staring out over the Atlanta skyline. "What are the odds?" Keisha was quiet for a beat, then said, "You just became the precedent." As Imani prepares to finalize her conference presentation, Ayana enters the lab with a strange look. She hands Imani a manila envelope and said, "This just came from internal security. You're going to want to see this." Inside, security footage from 6 weeks ago, showing someone copying Imani's encrypted files, wearing an Ayana Labs badge. He built his career on stolen ideas, and she just cracked it open. The security footage played in a slow, silent loop. A gloved hand, a swipe of a badge, the unmistakable glow of Imani's encrypted terminal. A data stick plugged in, folders copied. Whoever it was moved, like they'd done it before. Ayana stood beside Imani, arms crossed tight against her chest. Her jaw was clenched. She didn't speak at first. "Security says it's one of ours," she finally said, her voice low. "The badge belongs to a lab tech who resigned 2 weeks ago. No warning, no trace." "Name?" Imani asked. "Jeffrey Malden." Imani stared at the screen. "He worked nights. I barely saw him." Ayana nodded. "He was recommended by someone on the university's alumni referral network. We're running the connection now." A beat of silence passed. Then Imani said it out loud. "He was planted." Ayana didn't argue, because she knew. The breach didn't stop the momentum. It supercharged it. Imani's legal team filed an emergency petition to include the footage in their suppression claim against Sloan. But more importantly, it cracked open something deeper. Within 72 hours, 11 former students came forward publicly. They weren't just angry. They were ready. Some sent written testimonies. Others recorded video messages. All of them shared variations of the same story. Brilliant ideas dismissed, repurposed, or mysteriously absorbed into department-sponsored grants that bore Sloan's name. Most of them were black, brown, first-gen, or women. One student, Alicia Wren submitted her entire thesis timeline, highlighting exact paragraphs later, mirrored in a faculty-led study Sloan published the following year. Another, Jamal Fields, had kept a chain of emails where Sloan discouraged him from filing a solo patent, claiming it would be too ambitious for a student of your background. When asked to clarify what he meant by background, Sloan never responded. Imani compiled every statement, every receipt, every testimonial. She printed them, bound them, and dropped the manila envelope in front of the university's legal team during a scheduled review call. They didn't flinch, but they didn't deny it either. Instead, 3 days later, she received a certified letter at her apartment. We are prepared to offer Ms. Imani Cross an out-of-court settlement in the amount of $150,000. This offer is contingent upon the withdrawal of all claims in a signed non-disclosure agreement concerning university personnel or intellectual property events. From 2023, a muzzle. With a $sign, Imani stared at the letter for a long time. Then she folded it back into its envelope, marked it with a red Sharpie. No. She sent the entire dossier to Unlabbed, a rising investigative podcast known for tackling corruption and exploitation in elite institutions. They didn't hesitate. Their reply came within 2 hours. Let's record. Let's burn it down. The episode dropped a week later, titled The Lab Gatekeeper. It opened with audio of Sloan's mocking words, typical African imagination, and then cut to Imani's voice, raw, unwavering. She told her story without flinching. The compound, the sabotage, the recording, the lawsuit, the camera footage, the offer to shut up. Then came the chorus. Voices from every former student who had been dismissed, rewritten, buried. The podcast trended on Spotify within 48 hours. Clips went viral across TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Listeners poured in from across the globe. Parents of aspiring scientists, Black scholars, disillusioned students, former faculty, journalists, tech CEO. The story wasn't just about Imani anymore. It was about the machine and the gatekeepers who controlled it. The university responded with predictable blandness. We are deeply concerned by the allegations and are actively conducting an internal investigation to ensure fairness and transparency. No apology, no names, no action. But students weren't waiting. More sit-ins followed. Protest letters were sent. Faculty meetings grew tense. Petitions circulated to audit past faculty-led patents for signs of theft. Sloan's name became radioactive, and Imani's became untouchable. But the pressure came with a price. Ayana received a letter, slipped under her office door late one evening. No return address. Just one sentence typed across a plain white page. Drop the girl or drop your investors. Attached was a printout of Axiom Core's portfolio, highlighting every partner with money tied to Ayana's lab. Imani read it twice. They're threatening to pull out? She asked. Ayana didn't answer right away. Then she said, they're getting nervous. They bet on science, not scandal. Many stared at her. You think they'll do it? They might, Ayana admitted. But that doesn't mean we stop. You'd lose your lab. I'd build another, Ayana said. Imani's throat tightened. Because of me. Because of them, Ayana corrected. Because they've been winning too long. But the warning wasn't idle. 2 days later, Ayana's head of finance confirmed it. Axiom Core was initiating a strategic pause in their funding disbursements, citing reputational risk. No formal withdrawal, just frozen checks. Ayana absorbed the blow without flinching in public. But in private, she paced for hours. Imani found her that evening in the darkened lab, staring out at the skyline, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. You should have taken the money, Ayana said softly. The settlement. It wouldn't have meant you lost. Imani stepped beside her. It would have meant they won. Ayana nodded slowly. Then we pivot. To what? To the public. The next day, Ayana went on record. Live interview. National news. She stood tall in a navy blazer and black heels, her voice calm, her message fiery. Black genius isn't a liability. It's the backbone of every suppressed breakthrough in American science. And Imani Cross's work, this compound, isn't just revolutionary. It's hers. We won't be bullied. We won't be bought. And we sure as hell won't be erased. The interview sparked a new wave of support. Independent labs offered temporary space. Crowdfunding campaigns exploded. One fund titled Let Her Cook raised over $300,000 in 48. Students across the country wore lab coats with Imani's name printed on the back. She trended again, this time not as a victim, but as a visionary. But just as the tide began to turn, the shadows moved again. Keisha, the IP attorney, called Imani late one evening, with a tone that immediately raised red flags. "We found something," she said. "But you're not going to like it." Imani sat up in bed. "What?" One of the whistleblower tips, anonymous, unverified, but specific. It claims that Sloane's original relationship with Axiom Core wasn't casual. It was strategic. Strategic how? As in, they sponsored multiple research labs where he funneled student discoveries without their names. Imani went silent.
And there's more, Keisha added.
According to the message, one of those discoveries years ago led to a high-density capacitor line Axiom Core now markets under their Nova Charge series. Wait, that's... Imani's voice caught. "That's in our compound. They adapted part of that capacitor system into the modeling we ran." "Yes," Keisha said grimly. "Which means Sloane's not just stealing credit from students. He's been feeding their breakthroughs into corporate pipelines." Imani's head spun. It wasn't just academic sabotage. It was industrial exploitation. Decades of stolen potential. Monetized. Sanitized. Branded under white male names. And now her formula was next on the conveyor belt, unless she stopped it. She stood on the balcony that night, staring into the dark. Not broken. Not bitter. But burning. Because for the first time the world was finally lit, and she was ready to show them what she'd built in the shadows they tried to bury her in. As she prepares for her deposition, Imani receives a call from an unknown number. A distorted voice says, "We know what you're planning. If you testify, your mother's immigration papers won't be clean anymore." The higher she rose, the dirtier the attacks became.
The call ended, but the threat stayed with her, hanging in the air like poison.
"If you testify, your mother's immigration papers won't be clean anymore." Imani froze on her balcony, phone still pressed to her ear long after the line went dead. Her mind emptied, then raced all at once. She immediately called her mother. "Ma, are you okay?" Her voice trembled. Her mother, still half asleep, answered calmly. "Yes, baby. Why? What's wrong?" Imani didn't explain. Not yet. Not over the phone. Not until she could make sense of it. But she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about Sloane anymore. This was a system trying to scare her into silence. The next morning, the attacks went public. A headline appeared on a fringe science blog. "Rising scientist accused of data tampering and battery breakthrough." The article referenced anonymous sources, accused Imani of fabricating results to satisfy private funders, and painted her as unstable, ambitious, and unethical. They included a grainy screenshot from a student protest, her eyes closed mid-sentence, mouth frozen awkwardly. By noon, the article had been shared by 3 larger outlets. By 3 p.m., it was picked up by ScienceScope, a widely respected digital science journal. Her inbox lit up again. This time, not with support but with suspicion. People who had once reposted her interviews and stood in solidarity now quietly deleted their tweets. Blog posts disappeared. Even pages that had boosted her podcast episode went silent. Iana walked into the office gripping her tablet, furious. "They're pulling the Catalyst article," she said, retracted. Imani looked up. "What? Why?" Iana paced. "They say they can't verify the source documentation tied to your deposition." She paused, then added with disgust, "No one wants to be prematurely involved." "It's a smear campaign," Imani muttered. Iana nodded. "They're not trying to disprove your science. They're trying to make you radioactive."
Then came the offer.
A man in a gray suit showed up at Iana's facility unannounced, requesting to speak to Imani off the record. Iana allowed it, under glass observation. Imani sat across from him in the conference room. He gave no name, no card, just slid a black folder across the table. Inside was a 1-page contract, $2 million in exchange for full rights to Amanix 32. Under one strict condition, Imani's name would never be publicly attached to the compound. No co-creator credit, no media acknowledgement, no history. "You've made your mark," he said smoothly. "Let the science move forward. Let us protect it. You walk away rich. Quiet. Safe." Imani stared at the document. For a moment she let the silence sit heavy in the room. Then she closed the folder and slid it back to him. "Tell your people I wasn't born to be erased." He didn't argue, just nodded and left. That night, Imani went to visit her mother. She hadn't told her about the phone threat, but she needed to see her face, to make sure she was safe. They sat at the same chipped kitchen table Imani had studied at as a child. Her mother poured tea. "I've seen the headlines," she said softly. "The attacks. The lies." Imani nodded, her throat tightening. Her mother reached across and took her hand. "You are walking through a fire I hoped you'd never face. But I've known this path since the day I first saw your eyes." Imani tried to stay composed, but emotions surged. "They'll come for you next," she whispered. "And I won't let that happen." Her mother just smiled. "No one owns my freedom but God. And no lie they tell about you makes me feel less safe. It makes me proud." The next morning, another attack dropped. A TikTok video, heavily edited, showed Imani mid-lecture, cut and dubbed to make her sound arrogant and condescending. The caption read, "She thinks she's the only smart one in the lab." The clip hit 600,000 views in 3 hours. Comments turned brutal. "She just wants attention. That she stole someone else's work." This is what happens when DI runs wild. Yana wanted to sue. Imani stopped her. "Every fire they set proves they see the smoke rising from mine," Keisha called that night. "They're going all in," she said. "They know they're losing the legal argument, so now they're trying to destroy your reputation. This isn't new. They've done it to women like you before." Imani asked, "Where's this coordinated attack coming from?" Keisha didn't hesitate. "We traced the PR firm behind the work to Axiom Core, same one Sloan used when he buried a harassment case in 2017. Imani froze. "I never heard about that." "Exactly," Keisha said. "They buried it, just like they're trying to bury you." 3 days later, something else arrived. This time not a threat. It was a formal letter from the U.S. House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, inviting Imani to testify in an upcoming congressional subcommittee hearing on scientific discrimination and intellectual property bias. It was clear now, this wasn't just about her story. It was about all the stories that never made it this far. She didn't hesitate. She walked into Ayana's office, letter in hand. "I'm going," she said quietly. Ayana didn't flinch. "Then let's make them remember your name." Just as Imani began to prepare her testimony, a confidential memo leaked from a congressional staffer's inbox. It revealed that Sloan had already been added to the panel. He would be testifying too. The government wanted a balanced conversation. Her story wasn't just hers. It shattered a generational ceiling. Imani Cross remembered the day like a map. The date circled in her mind forever. The day the ruling came in and she became sole inventor of Aminex 32. After the decision, she didn't pause. She turned forward because she felt something bigger than herself. A responsibility, a calling, a debt owed to those who weren't given a start. Within weeks, she launched the Cross Innovate Scholars Fund, targeting underrepresented students nationwide. The first announcement came in the form of an email sent to 5098 chemistry, engineering, and physics departments at historically black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, and community colleges. The subject line, "Your idea deserves a stage. Application now open." The first cohort numbered 60 scholars, women, black men, Latinx students, indigenous youth, each one awarded a research mini-grant, paired with mentorship from her team, and a guaranteed internship at her labs. She spent the first Sunday of the program in a virtual kickoff with all 60 winners. She looked into screens all over the country: Alaska, Louisiana, Detroit, Honolulu. When the chat filled with names like Alicia Nyun, David Hernandez, Maya Redbird, she felt the truth of it. This wasn't rescue. This was recognition. She said, "Science is not about proving you fit in. It's about creating rooms you weren't invited to." I just signed the door open. Meanwhile, the exposure of Sloan's history ramped up. A whistleblower in the chemistry department tipped an investigative journalist with internal emails. One contained the line, "Let's be realistic about which voices get heard in innovation." Another, "Student projects are seeds, I harvest the crops." The journalist published the documents in a major outlet. The headline read, "Gatekeeper exposed, how one professor made a fortune on others' research." The timing of it staggered Imani. On a Tuesday, she peered at the screen and saw the name Barrett Sloan beneath the email chain, his signature visible. The article quoted a former board member anonymously. "We feared what she represented, proof that we were wrong." That line hit her deeper than any laboratory result ever had. Not because it was shocking, but because it was true. The university responded quietly. Sloan was removed from the faculty directory. Investigation panels were announced. But the deeper shift occurred in corridors and coffee rooms where students whispered to each other, maybe this time the system will change. Imani recognized the tremor, the one she once felt in the foot of Keller Hall when her name card sat alone on a desk. At a midday roundtable in her Atlanta lab, Imani addressed her new scholars. You are not assets to our company. You are architects of the future. When someone tells you you don't make it, you know the opposite, that you do, and you will. One young woman, Imania Yusuf, nodded through tears. I applied because I got told I wasn't smart enough. Today I'm leading my own material trial. Imani placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let's not only change the materials, let's change the narrative. She often recalled the freezing of her files, the deletion of her logs, the muttered "this isn't Africa." She used those moments now not as scars, but as fuel that propelled the foundation she launched. The Cross Innovate Foundation, headquartered in Atlanta, but with satellite partnerships across the country. Its mission statement: funding brilliance, crushing ceilings, making STEM inclusive. The first annual gala raised over $12 million, with keynote speeches from Black physicists, indigenous engineers, and immigrant chemists. Imani walked the stage with grace, but inside her heart held more. She realized that the breakthrough she fought for in the lab was now echoing in lives she had yet to meet. One evening, Imani sat in her glass-walled office, scrolling through emails. Among them, an official letter from the White House Associated Honorary Awards Division, which among other things noted that nominations for the National Medal of Science, the highest U.S. scientific honor, were now under consideration. Though she wasn't guaranteed anything, the mention of her name in the correspondence folder made her shoulders drop with fatigue and rise with pride. The foundation she started, the students she mentored, the formula that refused to be buried, all of it felt aligned. Her team gathered for a late meeting to plan next year's second cohort. Zuri arrived with a printout. Board members' audio testimony included mention of Sloan's institutional pipeline. They now call it the Idea Rerouting Program, Camille added. And the university has quietly backdated patent audits for 26 faculty labs. The room stilled. This one single ruling had triggered another chain, another avalanche of reckoning. Imani stood, moved to the window, looked toward the tree-lined Atlanta skyline. Evening lights began to glow like sparks in the gathering dark. She turned back to her team. We're not done, she said. Today we open rooms. Tomorrow we walk through them naked. No apology, no gatekeeper, no silence. That night she returned to her apartment and found a letter waiting for her. It was hand-delivered. No header. Inside, a short note typed in silver ink. Keep going. We're behind you. Beneath the note, 8 signatures. All from anonymous former students of Sloan. Their names: Alicia Wren, Jamal Fields, Keisha Marin, and 5 others. They had signed "Your success reclaims our stories." Tears gathered in Imani's eyes. She realized that this wasn't only about her battle, it was about restoring voices. She folded the note, placed it in her drawer, and reached for her phone. One new notification: a nomination confirmation. Received Cross Innovate Scholars Fund. Startup grant. Another: you are being considered for an honorary national award. She exhaled. The tide was turning, but the wind felt colder now, because the field was wider and the stakes were higher. Back in the lab the next morning, she walked through the prototype bay. The younger engineers looked up and smiled. Their energy reshaped, renewed. One young man, Marcus Lee, said shyly, "Dr. Cross, your keynote at Munich inspired my senior project." She stopped, turned to him. "Then make sure your senior project inspires someone else." He nodded. She moved to the synthesis station. Screens showed charge cycles, durability standings, life cycle graphs. The numbers were climbing. The months of struggle, the stolen files, the recording, the board hearings, they had led to this tangible progress. She leaned in and touched the cold metal casing wrapping the prototype battery, her name stamped clearly, patent number visible. It struck her. She had won the fight inside the system. Now she would build outside it. In the following days, news outlets covered the Foundation's first major partnership. A historically Black university signed a multi-year research contract with Cross Innovate Labs, receiving full access to trial protocols, direct mentorship, and shared licensing revenue. The headline read, "From student to partner, Black university teams with Cross Innovate to democratize innovation." Imani watched the coverage, swallowed the pride, then returned to the draft of her speech. She would mention this partnership. She would mention the student. She would mention the foundation. But she did not mention Sloan. That chapter was closed. However, she couldn't ignore the quiet stories emerging. An anonymous researcher said he left a prestigious lab because ideas would get refiled under the PI's name. A former student revealed years of mentorship turning into authorship grabs. Each story echoed the one she had lived, and each one reinforced why her foundation's mission mattered. Her phone rang. The caller ID said, "Private number." She answered. A female voice. "Dr. Cross. This is from former board member Ian Fletcher. Kindly check your email." The line went dead. She opened her inbox. The subject, interim board statement. Sloan Review Committee. She clicked. The text said, "We regret to inform that Dr. Barrett Sloan has been suspended from all patent filings pending full audit. The board acknowledges significant evidence of misappropriation and systemic suppression of underrepresented researchers." Imani sat back. The words were bland. The implications seismic. She realized something. The fight wasn't over because she'd won a formula. The fight was ongoing because she'd opened a door. And now the institution was scrambling behind her. She looked at the silent battery unit beside her, the team working quietly in the lab, the students in training rooms across the country. She looked at the nomination email again. The foundation, the partnership, the board statement.
And she smiled.
As Imani prepares her acceptance speech for the nomination, her phone lights up with a video attachment. It's a live feed of a student opening a prototype battery pack marked Cross Innovate Labs, Prototype A12. The young woman said, "We did this together. Your name is here." Imani watches. Then the screen glitches, and a message appears. The next supply chain will come from where they least expect it. The insult that tried to define her became the title of her victory. Imani Cross stood backstage at the televised National Awards ceremony, the murmurs of the crowd beyond the curtain rising like distant thunder. The spotlight backstage was warm, almost disorienting after years in dim labs and ignored proposals. Her gaze drifted to the framed quote behind her. "This isn't Africa," immortalized in quiet pen on paper. It was the phrase that had once silenced her. Now it served as a reminder of what she'd overcome. When her name lit up on the big screen, and the crowd erupted, she stepped forward. The stage lights turned radiant. The camera zoomed in. She held the metal plaque, the National Medal of Science, with steady hands. She breathed in the moment, and let it scaffold her. She began her speech. "More than a decade ago, I walked into a lecture hall with a 4.0 GPA and was told I didn't belong. I was told this isn't Africa. Tonight, I stand before you representing not just myself, but every young girl, every underrepresented scholar, every questioning mind that was told you don't fit. I didn't fit their picture, so I changed the portrait." Her voice rang across the auditorium, crisp and unyielding. She named them, the girls who had emailed her, the students she'd mentored, the young women with hope shaking in their voices. "Kayla, Amina, Marisol, Alicia, to you I say, you belong. You belong in the lab. You belong in the patent office. You belong under the stars. And you belong on the moon." Tears filled the audience. On the broadcast from her mother's living room, small and dignified, she brushed tears away as she watched her daughter's image on screen. The camera lingered on her, one hand pressed to the television glass, the other over her heart. The night after the speech, the hashtags lit up across the internet. Belonging in STEM. Cross on the moon. They were wrong. The foundation she'd built saw a surge. Applications from young black scientists, indigenous engineers, queer technologists, all pouring in with messages like, "I saw you, so I started believing." Meanwhile, at Cross Innovate Labs, interns gathered around a live stream of the speech. Imani returned to her office, removed her medal, and walked through the lab corridor. Models of trials, data graphs, prototypes lining the benches, all once lonely now buzzing with purpose. Camille greeted her with a high five. "You made history tonight." Imani nodded. "We're making the future." In the days that followed, the press arrived at her doorstep. Headlines declared, "From diversity candidate to lunar innovator, the journey of Imani Cross." One feature asked, "How does she handle success?" Her answer, "By handing it off. I'm not the hero, I'm the messenger." Then the unexpected twist arrived. A documentary crew contacted her. "Filming starts next month. Your story, the system you broke, the moon you're going to. 5 episodes. She agreed. Sitting in a glass writing room, she signed the contract. She didn't expect cameras, but she accepted them because she understood the power of visibility. And then the letter came. In her mailbox, a sleek envelope stamped with the seal of the National Space Agency. Inside, subject lunar payload confirmation. Imanex 32 to be included in commercial lunar services mission. Imane's heart thundered. The formula she'd fought to defend, the compound born from erased logs and quiet nights, would now carry power to the moon. She imagined it, a small battery pack, stamped with her name, nestled on a lander, traveling across the void. The insult "this isn't Africa" echoed no more. The idea of belonging expanded to include Earth and its orbiting companion. She called Ayana. "It's happening." Ayana's voice came calm and proud. "You built the ticket. Now you're the launch pad." They laughed, not out of relief, but because the gravity of it felt surreal. Amani looked out at the night sky from her balcony. The moon glowed silver. She pictured the lander's path. She imagined an African girl in a high school in Minnesota, or a native teen in New Mexico, seeing that moon and saying, "That could be me," because now it could. In classrooms, her journey began appearing on syllabi. Ethics and science courses taught how power, race, and innovation collided, using her story as the case study. Black history classes noted how a student dismissed for her origin authored a discovery heading to the lunar surface. She attended a roundtable with educators and smiled when one professor said, "Your story is required reading now." Her mother flew down to Atlanta to celebrate. In the lab, Imani stepped into the central testing arena and announced, "Today, we begin the Moon Mission Division." The team cheered. The monitor behind her flashed. Prototype I-12, ready for payload. She pressed a button. A model lander icon spun. The room applauded. The documentary crew filmed her as she cleared a whiteboard. She wrote, "Belonging is built," and underlined it. A camera zoomed in. She said softly, "They said I didn't belong. I'm making a place where nobody has to ask if they fit." She paused. The twist was full. Her work no longer stayed terrestrial. It crossed the boundary of world. The phrase that once silenced had now become the tagline for her legacy. And then the final scene arrived. On launch night, the lab gathered for the live broadcast. Engineers, interns, mentors, families. Imani's mother sat at home, watching. The countdown began. Rockets roared. The payload separated. The lander drifted. The screen flickered to the moon. And amid applause, Imani whispered, "This is Africa too." They told her she didn't belong. She redefined where we all belong. How many stories like Imani's never get told? Because someone didn't have the strength to keep going, or the world refused to listen. If her fight lit something in you, don't let it fade. Type yes if you believe brilliance deserves a seat, no matter the skin it's wrapped in, and subscribe if this broke your heart. She walked back in through the front door with her name on the lecture screen. The brick facade of Keller Hall looked unchanged. The same ornate cornices, the same stone steps worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. But to Imani Cross, it felt different, charged, humming, waiting. She paused at the large glass doors, inhaling the faint scent of old linoleum, decades-old coffee stains in the lobby carpet, and that signature institutional air, the smell of ambition, of fatigue, and of challenge. She clutched the folder in her hand, a neatly printed lecture outline titled Ethics and Innovation, Who Owns the Future? Her name was printed beneath the title in bold. Guest lecturer Imani Cross. The invitation itself was a statement. The same halls that once rejected her now hosted her. She walked into the lecture theater early. The seats were rising tiered, the lighting modern but harsh, the AV system blinking ready. At the front, the large screen displayed her name. She looked up at it and allowed herself a small, quiet smile. No longer a student, no longer the diversity candidate, no longer ignored. But the room still held ghosts. In the back row, she could see a former professor, Dr. Wendell Carver, watching. Carver had supervised many rotations. He had been polite when she arrived, but distant. He didn't look away now, but neither did he smile. Something in his gaze said, "You made it, and I missed it." She took a steadying breath and walked to the lectern. A murmur rose among the students. She could feel it ripple through the room like a wave. Some stood to greet her. Others sat quietly, anticipating. The tension in the air was a mix of admiration, skepticism, and expectation. She began. Good afternoon. My name is Imani Cross, and today I'm going to talk about innovation, not just how we build it, but who it leaves behind. Her voice was calm, confident. She didn't reference the past directly. She didn't need to. Every room full of students already knew the unspoken version. The student ignored, the files deleted, the nod that came too late. She clicked the slide. It lit up with the first graphic, a world map showing battery waste sites, lithium extraction zones, and regions of environmental burden. She paused. Innovation has a cost, she said. Sometimes the cost is measured in money, sometimes in human dignity, sometimes in who is allowed to dream, and who isn't. She watched the students. Some furrowed their brows, others shifted in their seats. A young man in the front row wrote fast. A young woman in the third row stared at her eyes, nodding slowly. That woman's name was Kayla Simmons, a junior chemistry major. Kayla had emailed Imani the day after the patent ruling. You changed my world. Kayla's presence here now meant something. Midway through the lecture, Imani opened up about her journey frame by frame, though anonymized. The deleted folder, the whispers, the lecture hall where she was told she didn't belong. But she framed it as data, 14 months of erased logs, 250 million data points, and one compound reborn. That was the scientific story, the personal story. You already heard it every time someone told me I was outside scope. Her tone held no bitterness. It held clarity. She paused and asked, how many of you were told you weren't smart enough? Not focused enough? Not from the right background? The hand-raised count surprised her. A dozen or more students raised hands. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked ashamed. One black student near the back looked away. The lecture ended with a call to action. Build systems so no one has to rebuild themselves. Be the mentor you needed. Be the blocker you break. Be the door you open. A final slide glowed. Invention is only half the equation. Inclusion completes the circuit. As she stepped down from the podium, applause rose. Not polite, earnest. Some students stood. Cameras, phones rose. She shook hands in the front row. Kayla Simmons approached her, voice wavering. Dr. Cross, thank you. I didn't know I could do this until you showed me I could. Imani smiled. And now you know others will know too. Behind her, Dr. Carver nodded, his head slightly bowed. She caught his eye, and for the first time she recognized something, respect. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In that moment, the lecture hall itself shifted. She walked out of the theater past the reception desk, through the lobby, across the brick steps. Students called out, Dr. Cross, thank you. You're the reason we're here. The sun had just set, and the sky glowed in amber. To her left, Keller Hall's towers reached up like fists. To her right, the campus opened out to green quad spaces, pathways, new buildings. She paused on the steps and pulled out her phone. A message. Ready when you are. Lobby stage in 10 minutes. She smiled. Ayana had arranged a student panel gathering right after the lecture. She entered the lobby and found a crowd of students, some holding posters. Science belongs to us all. Black girls build. The energy was intense, electric. She took the microphone. Thank you all for coming, she began. Today isn't about me, it's about us. The ones who must be visible to make the lab visible. The ones who must lead to make leading normal. A cheer rose. Someone shouted, when is the university going to rename this building? Another held up a phone. Are we doing a selfie? But then the freshman student Kayla raised her hand again. Imani nodded for the mic to be passed. Kayla stood, voice quiet but firm. Dr. Cross, this is so inspiring, but I have to ask. I was told people like me don't make it in science. I heard it myself. Is that what you heard? Is that real? The room held its breath. Imani's heart tightened. She looked at Kayla, at her peers, at the blank windows behind them. Thank you for asking, Imani said softly. Yes, I heard it, twice, more. But everything I heard was not the truth of what I am now. It was someone else's fear of what I could be, and it's someone else's fear of what you can be. So yes, it is real, and yes, you can, and I'll help you prove it. The applause broke through. Some students wiped tears. Others raised posters higher. The energy shifted from admiration to ownership. As she turned to leave the stage, she locked eyes with Dr. Carver once more. He held Kayla's gaze, not hers, and smiled. For a fleeting moment, Imani felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. And then, just as the crowd began to disperse, her phone buzzed again. A new message came through. Meeting at midnight. Lab access. Someone found your archival drive. Need quiet. Imani looked out across the lobby filled with hope and selfies. The building behind her had once tried to bury her. Tonight, she returned to lead it. But the message stood apart. Shadowed, urgent. She pocketed the phone, took a final look at the banner behind the student crowd. Innovation in Equity, the lecture series, and then walked into the night, the echo of thousands of footsteps following. As she arrives back at her apartment, she finds a sealed envelope slipped under the door. University archives, access granted. One decision silenced her doubters and rewrote her legacy. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Imani was in her makeshift office at the new company's headquarters. Her name already on the glass door. Cross Innovate Labs. She paused mid-sentence, her pen hovering over the contract with a tech startup. The email subject line read simply, Patent Decision, CX 2025-9472. She clicked. Her heart thudded. On the screen the words were precise, unambiguous. Sole inventor, Imani Cross. She exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. It was over. The fight wasn't over, but the battle had been won. She stood, walked to the window, overlooking downtown Atlanta. The early evening light cast long shadows along the skyline. For a moment she allowed herself to absorb it. The cadences of the day, emails, tests, meetings, slowed. She looked out and felt something you couldn't plan: relief. A knock at her door interrupted the moment. Ayana stepped in, smartphone in hand. Did you see? She asked. Voice soft. Imani nodded, tears welling. Ayana embraced her. You did it, she whispered. They saw you. Imani didn't reply. The weight of the ruling settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle. Within hours the news broke publicly. Tech journalists, green energy bloggers, and every major science outlet ran headlines. Black female inventor wins landmark patent for next-gen battery. Twitter exploded. Stock tickers for green tech startups flickered. The ripple was immediate. Cross Innovate Labs received inquiries before the ink was dry. Licensing offers poured in, but Imani approached them like she had approached her work from the start. Methodically, guardedly, she convened her board: Ayana as CEO, Zuri as lead molecular engineer, Camille as director of prototype development. They reviewed the offers. Some companies wanted exclusive rights, others wanted global distribution. She negotiated for justice, not just compensation. Her first major deal, a multinational automotive firm, agreed to license a MNX32 for its next generation of electric vehicles, contingent on a sunset clause that allowed independent labs to access a non-exclusive version. Imani signed. She now held equity in that firm, and a royalty stream. But in her public statement she said, this isn't just a battery. It's an invitation for every mind that's been told it doesn't belong. The company grew quickly. What started in a converted warehouse space, labs, drafting tables, 3D printers, expanded into 2 floors of the building. Screens displayed real-time analytics of test cycles. Walls were lined with portraits of young researchers, women of color in STEM, a permanent exhibit Imani insisted on. For her, success wasn't a destination, it was a platform. She visited the prototype bay one morning. Camille looked up from a whirring synthesis reactor and said, Trial 78 just passed the 5,000 cycle durability mark. That's 4 times what we aimed for. Imani's eyes widened. Really? Yeah, Camille smiled. And the cooldown half-life dropped by 20. Imani felt a rush. This wasn't just the result of one woman's fight. It was the product of a team that believed. She walked through the bay, touching the steel exterior of the units being built. You're changing everything, she said. Camille nodded. Because you allowed us to. Imani didn't respond. She just walked on. Because it was never about her alone. The media coverage shifted too. No longer was the story about battle in academia, but now about innovation, ownership, and equity in science. Podcasts interviewed Imani. Late-night shows invited her to speak. She appeared twice on a major daytime talk show, not as a guest focused on trauma, but as a scientist discussing responsive energy storage and socioeconomic justice. She told her story, but the narrative had moved. She was building. She was leading. Despite the success, Imani never forgot the day her work was erased. The moment the lab folder disappeared, The mutter, "This isn't Africa," the threats whispering in darkness. She pressed those memories into her mission. Every presentation ended not with product specs, but with a slide. For every voice that ever said you don't belong, we built home here. Internally, Cross-Innovate Labs held weekly power hours, informal sessions where interns and junior researchers could present ideas, ask for support, receive mentorship. One Wednesday, the topic was protecting your IP before it's stolen. Imani sat in the front row watching a young engineer, Marisol, flip through her notebook nervously. "I'm working on a polymer memory unit inspired by my grandmother's weaving pattern," Marisol said, voice quiet. "But I don't know how to stop someone from taking it." Imani stood up. "You need more than notebooks. You need voice recorders, time-stamped logs, actual replication from the first day." She paused. "And you need people who believe in you now. Not when it's easy, but when it's contested." Marisol nodded, tears in her eyes. Imani offered her a handshake. "Your voice matters, especially when they try to dull it." That afternoon, Imani met Ayana in the corner office. "What if this success makes me one of them?" she asked. "What if I become the institution they used to guard?" Ayana smiled. "Then you guard others. You don't become the gatekeeper. You remove the gate." Imani exhaled. She let that settle. Months later, a major green tech summit in Munich invited Cross-Innovate Labs as the primary innovation exhibitor. Imani stood on stage beneath a massive screen. Behind her, the animation of Aminex 32's molecular structure spun slowly. The lights dimmed. A quiet hush fell. Then she began. "This isn't a story about a material. It's a story about belonging." The audience leaned forward. "It's about the day I was told I didn't belong in that lab. About the day they deleted my files. About the day I rebuilt in a basement because they made me invisible. But the compound we built doesn't recognize invisibility. It responds. It adapts. It endures. And it belongs." The crowd erupted into applause. Backstage, Ayana hugged her. "You're not just the inventor now," Ayana said. "You're the headline." Imani nodded. But her mind was already on what came next. Then came the twist. Weeks later, Imani's inbox pinged. It was a message from her old university, its letterhead crisp, the tone unfamiliar. "Dear Dr. Imani Cross, we are pleased to extend an appointment for you as Visiting Professor of Sustainable Materials, effective fall term 2026, annual salary to be negotiated. We hope you will return to mentor the next generation." Imani stared at the screen. The same walls that tried to gate her now offered a professorship. She laughed. Soft, dry. "You want me to come back in as faculty?" she said aloud. Ayana, leaning over her shoulder, smiled. They finally got the message. Imani leaned back. Or they realized they can't write the future without people who can build it. The offer wasn't just redemption for her, it was an invitation to transform the institution. She looked out the window at the skyline once more. The city lights flickered, not with promise, but with responsibility. She called her mother. "Ma, I got an offer." "What kind?" "To teach, to lead, where they once told me I didn't belong." There was a pause on the other end. Her mother finally said, "Then you go. You show them what belonging looks like." Imani's throat tightened. "I will." They hung up. Imani sat in silence for a long time. The ruling, the company, the summit, they were triumphs. But the professorship made it personal again. This wasn't just for her anymore. It was for every student who walked into a lab and saw walls before equipment. She turned to her team, who had gathered for the evening briefing. "Team," she said, "the next phase begins. We scale. We democratize. We make sure this doesn't just belong to a few." They nodded, and the slide changed. It said, "Fall 2026 Cross-Innovate Labs, University of Tomorrow Initiative." As Imani drafts her acceptance speech for the professorship, she receives an unsigned letter delivered to her office. "Don't let the old guards co-opt you. We paid attention the first time." Inside, a USB drive labeled University Archives. In a room full of power, she told the truth, on the record. The hearing room wasn't as grand as Imani had imagined. The carpets were bland, the walls beige. The ceiling lights buzzed softly with fluorescent indifference. But the weight in the air, that was undeniable. Name placards lined the panel table like a roll call of American influence. Reporters, interns, aides, they all turned as she entered. Imani wore a tailored black suit, no jewelry, no frills. Just her natural hair, pulled into a bun so tight it held in the tremble she refused to show. She took her seat at the long witness table beside a woman from a civil rights tech group and a quiet older man representing whistleblowers in the pharmaceutical industry. And then came him.
Barrett Sloan.
He entered from the opposite side, older than she remembered, but smugness untouched. He wore a charcoal blazer and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the light with every calculated nod. When he passed her, their eyes met, but his didn't flicker. No guilt, no fear, just arrogance lacquered in decades of tenure. The gavel came down. The hearing was in session. The committee chair, Congresswoman Lillian Hayes, welcomed everyone and introduced the topic: scientific discrimination and intellectual property inequities in U.S. institutions. She spoke politely, deliberately, but her tone carried weight. Today, she said, we are not here to debate merit. We are here to confront the walls placed in front of merit that happens to look a certain way. Imani's name was called first. She rose, placed her hand on the mic, and began. My name is Imani Cross. I'm a doctoral candidate in chemistry and the inventor of Aminex32, a compound with the potential to transform sustainable energy storage globally. Her voice was calm, steady, but her hands, hidden beneath the table, clutched each other tight. She looked out across the panel of lawmakers, then into the lens of the C-SPAN camera. I come before you today, not because I sought attention, but because I was denied protection. I had to record my oppressor. I had to prove my discovery twice. I had to rebuild my project after it was deleted, discredited, and stolen. She paused. And I'm not the only one. Gasps whispered through the room. She continued. I've spoken to 10 other students, mostly black, brown women, immigrants, who also had ideas taken, who were told their science was too speculative, too emotional, too African. Those are the exact words I was told. This isn't Africa. She quoted it without flinching. Sloan shifted beside her, arms folded across his chest. Imani didn't look at him. She looked at the lawmakers. I'm here to ask why the institutions we trust with the future of science are still operating with the bias of its past. Why mentorship becomes ownership. Why oversight becomes theft. Why black excellence is still seen as accidental until proven otherwise. A long silence followed. Then murmured applause from the gallery. Congresswoman Hayes leaned forward. Ms. Cross, do you believe your experience is systemic or isolated? Imani didn't blink. Systemic. Do you have evidence that institutional funding decisions were influenced by race or gender? Imani nodded. I do. And I submitted them to your staff ahead of this hearing. The chair turned to her aides, who confirmed the documents, emails, deleted file logs, security footage had all been reviewed and verified. Imani sat back, her chest rising slowly. She had spoken the truth, and this time, it was on the record. Then it was Sloan's turn. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat with theatrical ease. I've served in academia for over 30 years, he began. I have supervised hundreds of students, funded millions in research, and published in every major chemistry journal in the country. He glanced toward Imani briefly. It is unfortunate that in today's climate, standard academic procedure is so easily reframed as oppression. Imani didn't flinch. Sloan continued, spinning a narrative of mentorship, miscommunication, and regrettable misunderstandings. He never denied deleting her files. He claimed the lab had automated cleanup protocols. He never denied downplaying her work. He claimed it lacked institutional support. The committee wasn't buying it. Congressman Rivera interrupted. So, Dr. Sloan, you're saying Ms. Cross independently created a high-performing sustainable battery compound using methods you dismissed, but somehow that success is still yours? Sloan paused. I'm saying the lab environment helped shape the foundation for her project. Congresswoman Hayes leaned in. You're saying the walls deserve credit for the paintings. Silence. Then murmured laughter across the room. The tide had turned. Outside, news vans circled the building. Leave tweets lit up. Science bloggers posted play-by-plays. One wrote, Imani Cross didn't testify. She ignited. Inside the private committee lounge after the hearing, Hayes approached Imani directly. I've sat through 100 of these, she said. That was one of the most focused testimonies I've seen. Imani blinked. Thank you. I just needed to say it. You didn't just say it, Hayes said. You changed the stakes. Within 48 hours, the impact rippled. Imani cross-trended again. Universities nationwide issued statements pledging to review faculty IP protocols. The National Science Foundation published a call for reforms. And Sloan? He resigned quietly. No press conference. No apology. Just a one-line email circulated internally. Due to ongoing health concerns, Dr. Barrett Sloan will be retiring effective immediately. It wasn't justice, but it was an ending. And Imani had survived to see it. She returned to Atlanta to applause from her lab. Camille ran to hug her. Zuri sent a bouquet. Ayana uncorked a bottle of wine. But Imani didn't smile until she stepped into her lab and saw Aminex 32 glowing under soft blue light, alive, stable, unshaken. She pulled off her coat and went back to work, because the fight might be over, but the mission had just begun. That Friday, an official email arrived from the U.S. Patent Office. Subject line: ruling issued. Case CX. Imani's breath caught. She clicked. After full review of documentation, deposition, time-stamped data logs, verified synthesis footage, and multiple third-party witness accounts, the patent board finds in favor of Imani Cross, sole inventor of Yeminex. The words blurred for a moment. She read them again. This time, slowly. Sole inventor. For a second she didn't move. Then she stood, walked to the window, let out a single breath she didn't know she'd been holding for years. Below, her team moved through the corridors. Papers shuffled. Beakers clinked. Life continued. But she was no longer just part of the experiment. She was the outcome. That night, as she sleeps for the first time in weeks, her phone buzzes. A new message lights up the screen. Geneva keynote reinstated. You're not a guest anymore. You're the main event.